Well, it happened. Kamala Harris took on Donald Trump in debate for the 2024 election, and I must admit, neither of them were impressive. Truly and fundamentally a waste of my fucking time. I am stupider for having watched it, and thus I hope you didn't spend the time out of your day to also watch it as well. We're going to go ahead and talk about what we saw unfold in that debate, and truly, Donald Trump dropping the ball in numerous instances, Kamala Harris realistically not having any major blunders, so I would argue she actually came away with the win on the night. Probably realistically, when it comes to the fact of the overall perceptions of how people are viewing someone like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, I would argue we're probably exactly where we were before this debate started. The betting odds did shift a bit in Kamala Harris's favor, which was anticipated because she didn't have any major blunders and she has been known as a candidate for being a terrible public speaker. So clearly that was something that swung some people behind her when it comes to the fact of their betting odds, as well as what we saw with a bit of the market shifting when it comes to the fact of polling odds as well. So the thing that I find most intriguing about all of this would be the nature of how consistently someone like Donald Trump dropped the fucking ball. Oh my goodness, man. The fact that Trump was sitting there speaking with Kamala Harris, and he has a litany of different issues that he could actually tackle, but of course, as per usual, can't do so with any of the minutiae that actually sell the merits of his arguments to bolster his points. It really highlighted the fact that, much like Kamala Harris, Donald Trump has nothing more than hollow talking points. She doesn't know anything, but the thing is, Donald Trump is combating her on this stage, and he also doesn't know anything. If he had any morsel of information that he could add to give contextual depth to what he was saying, it would have been hammer fisting her into the dirt and making sure that she had no capacity for recourse. But Donald Trump, like I've stated, being someone who knows effectively nothing, he's never read a book in his life. Everything he knows about everything he knows is either something he saw on Sean Hannity on Fox News, he heard it on a television program, or he heard it in a back channel conversation from something someone referenced that they heard or saw on television. He doesn't know anything about anything. And when you see a debate like this where Donald Trump actually needs to have relevant and pertinent information to destroy his opposition, to highlight the fact of why it is that you should be voting for him, well, it's very clear that he has come up short once again on that front. And the thing that I want to go ahead and touch on as well when it comes to the fact of Donald Trump coming up short, well, what we saw was how consistently he dropped the ball when having open opportunities provided to him by the moderators to have a field day of attacking Kamala Harris for the standards of what she has supported. They gave him an opportunity in that of talking about the border. And what did he do? He dropped the ball once again because he sits there after Kamala Harris eggs him on by making a comment about the size of his rallies, and then he takes the bait immediately because he can't handle his ego being slighted, and then he runs off into the ether talking about how great the rallies are. They're the greatest there ever been, the biggest rallies anyone's ever seen. No one's ever seen a rally as great as mine. Talking about how no one goes to Kamala Harris rallies and events, which if you've seen the footage, you know that is most certainly not the case. Democratic apparatchik as well as many of the voting base have been whipped up into a frenzy behind Kamala Harris. And why is that? Because they actually have a candidate they can stand behind that has life within their bones rather than the literal corpse that they were all cowering behind because they were afraid to openly state their support for. So once they saw someone that actually had, let's say, vigor and life within their soul rather than being a decaying husk as Joe Biden is, it was very easy to invest themselves within that person, which is exactly why you saw these events that Kamala Harris was hosting blow up in mass when it comes to the fact of how many people were actually attending. Okay. So another thing I would like to actually address here would be the nature of Kamala Harris and her consistent lies on the topic of gun control specifically, because she makes a comment when Donald Trump is talking about how she wants to take the guns. What does she say? She goes, "Oh, well, Tim Walz and I are both gun owners, so can you please stop with these ridiculous lies?" Which she herself is lying through her teeth, as she has been caught on camera numerous times, whether in subversive videotapes that she did not know was being recorded, or in open interviews that she's giving, or podiums that she's speaking at in front of people at massive events. She's clearly stating that she believes in a mandatory buyback program. And what does that mean? That you will have to acquiesce and do whatever it is that she demands on the front of the Second Amendment, because apparently it's wrong that you have the capacity to defend yourself. And what Kamala Harris will do if in office is enact a mandatory buyback program. And I must admit, the nature of what you would see pop off if something like this was to occur would be quite fascinating, because I don't know if you're familiar, but what actually started the Revolutionary War, well, it wasn't just the redcoats arriving on our shores. No. Why is it that Paul Revere was going through the countryside in the middle of night, knocking on every single door that he could encounter and saying, "The British are coming, the British are coming"? Well, it's because when the British were once previously in the land of the 13 colonies, what did we see? The king had demanded, because they weren't paying the stamp tax and the tea tax, to take their firearms, to raid the armories, and in doing so, this is what began the Revolutionary War. So now let's go ahead and throw it into these clips of Kamala Harris talking about how she's going to enact a mandatory gun buyback program when she gets into office, but of course, as you know if you watched the debate, she stated the entire time that that was never her plan, because she herself is a gun owner, you see.
This business about taking everyone's guns away, Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away, so stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
I support buybacks, and it's something I'm so passionate about and so looking forward to being president to address. We've got to deal with this.
How mandatory is your gun buyback program?
It's mandatory.
Stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Isn't that just something? Claiming we're not going to take your guns away, but just years prior during your previous presidential run, where of course you didn't win a single delegate and you didn't even make it past Iowa because you're so fundamentally unlikable, but the establishment needed someone that they could slot all of their money behind that they had in the war chest for Joe Biden, as well as another apparatchik that would do nothing more than the bidding of the uniparty. So we see that you were most certainly someone who was slotted in because Joe Biden was effectively cooed out of his position as the President of the United States. And the thing that I find so stunning about this clip of Kamala Harris claiming that she supports gun control, mandatory gun buybacks, well, it's not the only one. Just wait, there's more.
Will finally pass red flag laws, universal background checks, and an assault weapons ban.
Do you believe in the mandatory buyback of quote-unquote assault weapons? And whether or not you do, how does that idea not go against fundamentally the Second Amendment?
Yeah, great question. I do believe that we need to do buybacks, and I'll tell you why. First of all, let's be clear about what assault weapons are. They have been designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly. They are weapons of war with no place on the streets of a civil society. I've seen assault weapons kill babies and police officers. So, one, I'll tell you, when elected president, if the United States Congress continues to fail to have the courage to do something about this, I'm prepared to take executive action and put in place a ban on the importation of assault weapons into our country. But we still have to deal with the over 2 million assault weapons that are currently in the streets of America. And so a buyback program is a good idea.
What would you do about the millions of, specifically, assault weapons that are already in circulation? What do you do about those?
Well, there are approximately 5 million, to your point, Craig. We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program. It's got to be smart. We got to do it the right way.
And there you have it. Do you really need any more examples? Well, don't worry, we're going to be providing another one. And the thing that I find most intriguing about all of this is the fact that you have to ask yourself, what are you going to trust? Are you going to trust the footage of what you saw of Kamala Harris in 2024 stating that she would never do something like come for people's guns? Or do you listen to her in all of the numerous instances where she talked about how we have to take assault weapons off of our streets? They're nothing more than weapons of war. We have to do mandatory gun buybacks. And what does mandatory mean? It means we're going to mandate that you sell the government your guns, and you're doing so at the behest of the barrel of a gun. That's right. So what happens if people don't acquiesce, Kamala? What standards would you see visited upon them? Because what people need to realize is it's always that of the most tyrannical forms of government that come for your ability for self-defense, to defend not only your family, but everything you love from the tyranny of the state. And my goodness, Kamala Harris is quite interestingly being one of the most vocal candidates for coming for people's firearms, so it'll be quite fascinating to see what pops off as she actually gets into office in the 2024 election. The thing that I think is most laughably insane about what we saw with Kamala Harris openly stating she wasn't going to be coming for people's guns? Well, it's that she had actually told David Moore, the guy who was the actual moderator for the debate with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, which realistically, in some ways, this was a 3-on-1 debate because of the fact of the framing of many of the questions. Also, the moderators quite literally fact-checking Donald Trump in real time, not even doing so with actual relevant information, just saying, no, actually, that's not true, and interjecting their own opinions, which is completely out of the scope of normality when it comes to the fact of what you see with debates, and especially presidential debates. But nonetheless, we see that he actually asked Kamala Harris a similar question about her approach to things like gun control when she was running before in what? Oh, that's right, the 2020 election cycle. Isn't that just incredible? But of course, as you see, rather than acting as a journalist when Kamala Harris openly states that she doesn't want to come for anyone's guns in the 2024 election debate, he doesn't sit there and call her out and say, well, you've actually told me exactly the opposite when I asked you this question on a stage just a couple of years ago. But of course, as we know, people such as this being nothing more than liars for the powerful, they will gladly do whatever is necessary to make sure they can propel whatever candidate that the Uniparty demands is pushed into the landscape of American politics. So now let's go ahead and throw it into this clip of ABC just years ago that is completely in opposition to what we saw Kamala Harris saying on ABC just days ago.
In recent days, former Vice President Biden has said about executive orders, some really talented people are seeking the nomination. They said, I'm going to issue an executive order. Biden saying there's no constitutional authority to issue that executive order when they say I'm going to eliminate assault weapons, saying you can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying, no, we can't, let's say, yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a constitution.
Yes, we can.
You know you've gone off the rail when you have Joe Biden openly calling you out for the fact that, like, we have a constitution. Let's be constitutional and keep this within the parameters of what the United States stands for. Joe Biden very well may have been an avatar for the regime and a corpse on marionette strings at that. But the thing that we need to realize is this is someone that was raised within the system. And in many ways, he is an individual, despite the fact that so many of the actions that he advocates for defies the standards of the Constitution, it is still a fundamental framework that he holds in a very high regard. And you can see this with many people within the halls of Washington, D.C. It's why you heard the term, our sacred democracy. But the thing about that is that when you see certain people come into that framework that are trying to challenge the established ethos of what your established and sacred democracy represents, well, if you're not careful enough, what you'll see is those people will subtly shift the standards of what people believe it represents. And Kamala Harris is clearly a subversive actor on that front, whether intentionally or unintentionally, which is what's so curious about it. Many times people who are ideologically captured, they don't even realize the degree with which how much they have been programmed to be foot soldiers for the narrative that they are trying to convey. They believe that it's just their framework, their ideals, their mindset in how to approach the world. But what we must understand would be what? That how you're approaching the world very much many of the times comes with the conditioning that you've been programmed with, and that means that you will also be trying to, let's say, cast that nebulous web of what was thrown upon you over the world. And as you see someone like Kamala Harris, who is oh so consistently willing to do nothing more than climb the ladders of power and do so solely for the fact of power, completely, as you've heard here, defying the standards of the country that she claims she has the desire to serve. But realistically, as we see with many politicians, the only thing they desire to serve is themselves. And I truly think one thing that we should appreciate here when it comes to the fact of that clip on ABC from a couple of years ago is that it highlights David Moore's whole shtick of being a rational, objective, and honest journalist, someone who's a fair reporter. It completely blew that nonsense out of the water as it should have, because people need to realize that these people who play the middle of the road, that act as if they actually care about the conversations on both sides, all they care about is the conversation that the establishment deems acceptable that you're allowed to have within the confines of the spectrum of allowable opinion. Alrighty. Now let's go ahead and throw it into something that I thought was quite interesting, and it echoes what I had said previously when we were talking about the fact of who it is that actually won this debate. Well, it's not just someone like me who came to the conclusion that Kamala Harris very well may have been the person that won this presidential debate. As we can see here, it also comes from Fox News viewers as well. Here we see Fox News voter panel says Harris won the debate. Voters slam Trump for lacking new lines of attack on Harris. Isn't that just something? You should know as Donald Trump that you've truly fumbled the ball hard and just dropped the bag in an almost inconceivable fashion when even your people on Fox News are claiming that you lost the debate to Kamala Harris. Granted, you lost within a margin of error, but nonetheless, you still took the L, which of course Donald Trump never actually being able to accept if he gets anything wrong or if he loses in any way, shape, or form, he's very clearly going to claim victory in some fashion. Here you see voters taking part in a Fox News digital panel reacting to the debate said that Vice President Kamala Harris came away from the event with a victory. And most certainly true, but the thing that I find quite hilarious about this specifically is that we see that Fox News viewers are claiming, yeah, Kamala Harris came out on top. But what we also see is that CNN's Jake Tapper is openly calling out Kamala Harris and her campaign for not doing anything to tackle relevant questions. Because what I saw on CNN, I will admit, I was quite stunned. Because Jake Tapper is sitting there openly stating that Kamala Harris, well, she dodged even the first question that she was presented in the debate. She didn't even address what was presented to her. And then, of course, Donald Trump being completely incapable of tackling a debate head on because he's just someone who is floating out there in the realm of abstraction and theory, and he's just grabbing these pieces of string that are blowing in the wind tunnel that is his mind, trying to cling on to these thoughts so he can volley these ideas into the landscape. Well, what do we see? We see that Donald Trump had no ability to hit Kamala Harris on the fact that she didn't even answer the question because he probably didn't even realize it. It's insane, but what we need to understand is that Kamala Harris is so openly unimpressive that even CNN has to call out the fact that she is terrible in moments that she has to answer critical questions that will be kneecapping the position she's trying to take. So now let's go ahead and throw it into that clip from CNN.
Vice President Harris began the debate by punting the first question on the economy.
Do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
It went on from there. Despite the economy being the #1 issue facing the country, the sitting vice president generally reverted to talking points about a few of her policy proposals. Even Harris allies today are saying that she needs to talk more about what she will do for Americans if elected. Senator Bernie Sanders will be here in a second to talk about more about the need for her to fill in some of those blanks. On the border, another vulnerable issue for Harris, she also dodged.
Would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
Okay, that wasn't the question. When asked how she would break through the Israel-Hamas war stalemate, Harris said this.
We need a ceasefire deal, and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that.
Okay, but again, how?
Jake Tapper consistently going for Kamala Harris's neck should highlight how bad she actually did during that debate, and then understanding that should highlight how pathetically piss poor Donald Trump did during that debate. The thing that I would love to address here, though, specifically, is you see Jake Tapper asking all of these relevant questions, these things that actually matter, not these faux nonsensical talking points that are quite literally irrelevant and only meant to arouse you on the emotional front and completely nerf you on the intellectual. What we see is he's actually diving in, tackling the minutia of the topics at hand and the questions that she was not answering in a fashion that had any value to provide information to the American people with which she claims that she's going to serve. And that should make you realize something big, that these people within the corporate press, they do have the ability to act as journalists. They can flip that switch and immediately turn it on and not be the propagandist that they've presented themselves as for oh so long. But it comes down to the fact of, are they willing to do it? That's all I've got for this one. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great, and most importantly, my friends, as always, tell someone you love them. Peace out.